voter education series, Ballot Box Basics. For your awareness, this webinar is being recorded. As an attendee at this webinar, your camera is turned off, so your face will not be included. A reminder that closed captioning is available in Zoom. To enable closed captioning on your screen, click Live Transcript in your Zoom taskbar. If you need more assistance with closed captioning, I'm dropping a help document in the chat. If we could improve accessibility for you in any way, please let us know in the chat. So we begin our time together with the land acknowledgement. Colonial Pennsylvania boundaries were first drawn in 1681 over the original nation's land. We in Pennsylvania acknowledge the land's ownership of original indigenous peoples, honoring the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the great nations of Pennsylvania: Erie, Iroquois, Munsee, Delaware, Shawnee, Ohio Valley, Susquehannock, and Lenape. We honor all original nations of the past and those among us today. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Our state offices oversees grassroots network of 30 local leagues all across Pennsylvania. The league encourages informed and active involvement in government while working to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influencing public policy through education and advocacy. To learn more about our work and to subscribe to our action alerts, please visit our website, www.palwv.org. We'll drop those links in the chat. I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's Ballot Box Basics, Election Processes and Integrity. We design these webinars because we know that voting, government, and elections can be complicated. In 2024, these monthly webinars will discuss important topics like registering to vote, mis- and disinformation, safety at the polls, and much more. Whether you're a first-time voter or have voted in every election you are eligible for, we think you'll learn something new. To watch previous recordings of Ballot Box Basics webinars, please visit the link in the chat. Throughout tonight's presentation, you're welcome and encouraged to ask questions using the Q&A function. We will leave about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end of the event. You are welcome to also engage with fellow participants in the chat, but please note we will only be answering questions with the Q&A tool. In addition to recording, please note that we will also send a copy of all slides to all registrants. Tonight, we are joined by Tad Hall and Timothy Benyo, County Elections Directors from Lehigh and Mercer. Tad Hall is Director of Elections in Mercer County and is President of the Western Pennsylvania Elections Personnel Association. Prior to coming to Mercer County in 2020, he was the Elections Director in Coconino County, Arizona, and Deputy Director in Richland County, South Carolina. That has worked on elections since 2000, when he was a part of the professional staff of the National Commission on Federal Election Reform. The Commission's recommendations were largely incorporated into Help America Vote Act of 2002. Prior to becoming an elections director, he did elections consulting for various governments. Also joining us tonight, Timothy Benyo, who is an experienced election administrator currently serving as Chief Clerk to the Lehigh County Election Board, a role he has held since 2010. His career spans a range of roles, from U.S. Army intelligence analyst paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division to IT specialist and director of elections in Carbon County. He is actively involved in several key committees, including the Department of State Election Stakeholders Committee and the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania Elections Reform Committee. Thank you two for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you like for us to take over and discuss?
Yeah, that'd be great if you want to go ahead.
Sure, that'd be good. Hold on, give me 1 second. All right. So I am Thad Hall of Mercer County, and my colleague Tim, who has a better beard than I do, is also here as well. We're going to go over a couple of things. So first of all, as you all know, the key thing to do, for registering, the key thing to know is the registration deadline is October 21st. And there are basically two ways that we encourage people to register. One is online using the Department of State's website, which is vote.pa.gov. And the second is you can use a paper form that's available from the post office, any public library, or from your county election office. And we encourage people to be very careful about registering through a third party, although I'm sure the League of Women Voters does a fine job of doing this. Other groups don't. And it's always a good idea to try to register directly with your election office. And, Tim can, tell you, we have issues with third-party registrations all the time when often they're not timely filed or they're not complete. Groups don't necessarily look through them very well. And I know Tim just had an experience with this.
Yeah, they definitely need to be completed fully, meaning that we need as much information as we possibly can get from the voter so that we have the ability to contact them efficiently if there is something wrong with their application.
Right. So if you're doing work for the league to collect voter registrations, you should definitely make sure that the voter has completed all the required sections of it, that they've signed it and dated it, because we get registrations that don't have complete addresses, for instance, which is kind of the most basic thing we need in order to register you, other than your name. So secondly, we really encourage people to check the status of their registration. The Department of State actually has a very good website where you can go on and you can check your voter registration status. And it gives you a lot of information. It tells you whether or not you're registered, at what address you're registered. It also will tell you if you're on the list to receive a mail ballot in November, which is very important because between now and November, everybody is going to get dozens of mailings from various political parties and groups encouraging you to register to vote, or encouraging you to submit a mail-in ballot, even if you've already submitted one. And so if you go online and check this, it'll keep you from submitting 10 of them, which people do. And it'll also tell you where your polling location is. And so, counties do move polling locations on occasion. We generally send out postcards when that happens, but we do encourage people to go online just to make sure that your polling place is still there, and to help other people do this, because you may, this is the election that pulls out all of the people who haven't voted in 4 years. So we have a whole cadre of people who vote once every 4 years, and we want to make sure those people, are able to get their ballots. I was being serious. If you know people who are getting lots of mail-in ballot applications, just have them throw them away if they've already submitted one. Don't let them keep submitting them.
And there's definitely a difference between an application and the actual ballot. Right. Ballots would only come from your voter registration office, from your county, not from any other organization.
Right.
Those would be applications.
Right. And so this is actually shows you what the screen looks like. It'll tell you where you're registered. Have you been approved? Do you have an approved mail ballot request for the upcoming election? This is actually me, so I do. And it will tell you where you're registered. And then at the bottom, you can see it tells me where my polling place is, which I never get to go to because for some reason I'm busy on election day. And then, there are 3 options for how to vote. You can vote on election day. Obviously, we're open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can vote by mail. The application deadline is October 29th, but we encourage people to apply at least 2 weeks before the election, if not more. And finally, you can come to your election office and vote over the counter. And you can find out the hours from your county's website of when they allow that, and also if they have any satellite locations. So, for instance, in Mercer County, we have 70 1,000 registered voters. We don't have any satellite locations. But as you get to bigger counties, they will often have satellite locations, especially in Philadelphia or Allegheny or places like that. Do you have satellite locations, Tim?
We do not in Lehigh County. We just have it at the over-the-counter right in our government center. There is a difference between early voting and over-the-counter voting. Early voting in a lot of different states, it means that you can cast your ballot right there at your voter office or a location that they designate. In Pennsylvania, it's a little bit different, where the law allows us to process an application, give a voter a ballot. That voter then gives the ballot back, and it's not counted until actually on election day. So it's not necessarily early voting, it's just early filling out of your ballot.
Exactly. So obviously, if you're going to vote on election day, just look for your vote here sign. You'll be good to go. It's important to remember that the people who run our local elections, they're people from your township, your borough, your city, from your neighborhood. And in most cases, we try to pull people from the exact location where you're from. And so these are the people who you know. So it's often good to remind people, especially during all these contentious times about elections, that it's really helpful to show people, remind people that, the election is being run by somebody's grandma, basically, most of the time, or grandpa, or something like that. So, if you're going to vote by mail, the key thing, so first of all, people ask us all the times, I get calls already like, where's my ballot? Well, they're still litigating all of that. Of who can be on the presidential ballot. There was actually litigation. They had a hearing today about Robert F. Kennedy's Jr.'s bid to be on the ballot. So we don't even expect to have a full list of candidates until mid-September because of all the litigation. So you can expect mail ballots to go out sometime during the first 2 weeks of October. And when you get your ballot in the mail, you should, we encourage people to vote pretty immediately, because we want to get those ballots back, because you can never know how long it's going to take for the post office to get us your ballot. The key things about voting by mail is to make sure you put your ballot in the yellow secrecy envelope, to make sure that you put that secrecy envelope, that you seal it, you put it into the return envelope, and then you sign and date it and send it back. And Tim, you want to talk a little bit about the mail-in, like how you guys mail them out and all of that, and how you notify people?
Yeah, every county in Pennsylvania is designated to conduct their own elections, so that everybody does it a little bit different. All the rules are basically the same, but some counties interpret those laws a little differently. Very important to put that ballot inside the yellow envelope, secrecy envelope, due to the law would then disqualify that ballot if it's not secret, and a voting person, a person in your voting office could potentially identify how you voted. So that's what the importance of the yellow envelope is. Also, some counties allow for curing. Curing isn't done throughout the whole state, but it depends how it's interpreted by the election boards in those counties. So you'd have to check with your county to see if those minor errors are allowed to be cured at your polling office or your voting office.
Right. And, one of the things to remember is that if you receive, once you receive your ballot, and you vote it, you can return it in a couple of ways. So first, you can always mail your ballot back, or you can drop off your own ballot, at your election office or at Dropbox locations. So for instance, in Mercer County, we have a Dropbox at our courthouse, which is where many of the smaller mid-sized counties have drop boxes, but some have remote drop boxes as well. And you can actually find that information on the Department of State's website as well. And as I was saying earlier, people are going to receive a blizzard of mail applications. Try to just submit one of them. How many Dropbox locations do you have, Tim?
The election board has designated 5 different locations throughout the county that are representative of our 5 different regional commissioners.
That's a good idea. Just have one in everybody's district and
One in
everybody's.
everybody's district, yeah.
You know, as Tim was saying, we don't have early voting. Instead, we have basically we do mail ballots at the election office. You can vote you can vote that ballot at your election office, or you can take it home with you and vote it and then come back. And this will start sometime in early October and it runs through October 29th. And you should check your county's website for how they're going to handle this. I want to talk about some special situations for people because these are important things to understand. You know, first, one of the things that often happens is that we have people who will call us and they'll say, well, my mother who's 85, she has a disability and I want to be able to return her ballot, or I need to be able to pick up her ballot because she made a mistake on it. And there's a form that you can find online. It's on most counties' websites, and it's also on the Department of State's website. And it allows people to authorize a designated agent. And we get lots of these, and they're very helpful because what it basically, the top of it has to be filled out. It gives you the voters' information. They're going to sign it. Then the person who's going to pick it up and drop off the ballot, they fill out the bottom part and it's signed. And, you know, Tim, do you have a lot of these people who do this?
We do, and it's very important that it's done for people that have a disability, that aren't able to get to a drop box or their polling place or to the county office, because the law is very specific on who can return your ballot.
Right. And so, you know, we get lots of cases of people wanting to return their spouse's ballot. You can't use this just to return your spouse's ballot because your spouse is going to be at work. This is for people with who have a disability as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So, and I think most people are very, good about following those rules, but we just want to make that clear. Secondly, I want to talk about people who need assistance at the polls. Pennsylvania has one of the oldest average age populations in the country. We also have lots of people with disabilities. And it's important for people to know that any voter can receive assistance. And most voters, you can bring somebody with you to provide assistance, or an election worker. The judge of elections can't assist voters, but anybody else at the precinct can. And every voting location in the count in every county in the state, they have an accessible voting machine that people can use. And it may, people may need the screen bigger. Maybe they have a tremor or a dexterity issue, and they have issue filling in the bubbles, but they can touch the screen. And so everybody has this. And Tim, can you talk a little bit about like the language assistance that you offer and what many counties offer?
Yeah, as Thad said, these machines will change contrast and make the font larger or smaller depending on what the need is of the voter. But they also give audio, the ability for someone that may be blind can just listen to the ballot and fill out their ballot by just using audio cues along with a touchpad a handheld touchpad that they would use. So a lot of counties are now offering ballots in different languages. There are federal regulations determining which counties and what the reasoning or the threshold is on the language that is needed for those counties. But languages in different languages and different visual areas can be helped.
And you program your accessible machines for Spanish, which is one of your covered languages, correct?
We do. We are required to provide Spanish balloting materials in all of our advertisements. Everything that we do, we are federally required to do that in English and Spanish.
And do you have people who are translators also?
We do. We do have full-time people in the office that work year round to provide Spanish assistance, and also we are required to have interpreters in our polling places that can help anyone that has a language barrier.
Right. And one of the things, that people should also realize is that we have several counties who have not fallen under the regulations that Tim is talking about. So for instance, my colleagues, I'm in the western part of the state, my colleagues in Lawrence County, they're not fully covered yet by the Voting Rights Act language requirements, but they've already taken the steps to translate all of their materials into Spanish for their Spanish speaking population, and they provide that on their voting machines as well. So we have a lot of counties that are just very proactive in making sure that either they have materials translated or they're providing people at the polls, at specific polling locations who can speak, the language of whatever population may be in a very specific area. And
the population is, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The population threshold is based on the census, and currently there are 3 counties, Philadelphia, Berks, and Lehigh County, that are mandated to provide assistance. But as Thad said, a lot of the other counties are doing that as a proactive approach.
Right. And in fact, I think Philadelphia does them in Chinese as well. So they have, they do theirs in 3 languages. The other thing to keep in mind is first-time voters. And Pennsylvania is an interesting state because obviously we have first-time voters who you might think of as being, kids who turn 18 and there's their first time voting, or you think about, somebody who moves to the state and the first time they vote, they have to show ID. The other thing to keep in mind too, though, is that in Pennsylvania, it's a first-time voter is also the first time a person votes in at a polling place in a township or borough. So for instance, I have a retirement center, it's a very large, multifaceted retirement area where they have everything from, skilled nursing home care to people who own their own homes on the complex. So if somebody moves from one end of my county to there, they're a first-time voter in that township, or in that township when they vote, and they have to show ID too. So it's very important to understand, if you're a first-time voter in your township or borough, you have to show ID. And we take a whole gamut of IDs, including IDs that are on people's phones. And so and that depends upon your county. As Tim was saying, we're 67 little islands of elections, but people should, it's always helpful to have your ID with you. And this also brings up people who come to vote over the counter. You may be asked to show ID when you're voting over the counter. And the reason why they may do that is because we can process you faster if you show us an ID, because we can bypass basically a computer process to check that you are who you say you are. If I can look at your driver's license, I can know who you are, and I don't have to run a set of computer checks. And so often that check can take up to 45 minutes. And so, if you'd like to sit there for 45 minutes, you can, but we always like to speed things up. And then I want to close out and just talk a little bit about some key election processes that we're about to go through. So as I mentioned, we don't have ballots yet, but we're already, counties are already programming their ballots, and they're already proofreading them and all of that. And then after we have ballots, we'll go through a very rigorous testing process. And Tim, can you talk a little bit about how you guys do your testing in Lehigh?
Sure. There's a bunch of different equipment that requires testing. Of course, the main equipment, it would be your voting equipment that the voter would see in the polling place. The ADA accessible equipment, and also, however, all of the ballots, the paper ballots, are tabulated. So all of these go through numerous tests where they are programmed or put in with, they're voted with specific votes that we will be looking for, and ensuring that the way that they are voted is the way that the machine tabulates, and then puts that information out to us, so that there is no discrepancy between what goes in and then what comes out.
And then after that testing is done, what we do is we seal all of that equipment up. And so we clear out all of the test data from the election where we've made sure everything works. Everything is zeroed out. And then we seal up those machines and we create a chain of custody log for every machine that we have. And then we will all order a lot of ballots. We'll all order 100% or more of the ballots for our precincts. And those go through the same process of chain of custody. We seal them up in very specific ways, normally with some sort of barcoded and digitized barcodes that are color coded that we're able to use so that we can make sure that everybody can trust that the machines that we tested, that we sealed, are the same machines that show up at a specific polling location.
And every county knows how many ballots are going out, and those ballots will be, of course, expected to come back.
Right. So if I send 1,000 ballots to a polling place, they're going to send me back 1,000 ballots. Some of them are going to be voted, some are going to be spoiled, some may be a provisional ballots, and then some will be unvoted, because we like to send lots of extras so that we don't run out. And another key part of the whole process of security and chain of custody is all the training that we do of our workers. And so I know, Tim is getting ready to ramp up all of his training. I'm getting ready to ramp up all of mine at the end of September. But we do a lot of training all of the counties do a lot of training of our workers on election day so that they know exactly what to do in every situation, and they understand how that chain of custody works, and they understand what they should be doing and how to handle every situation, because ultimately, they're the people who are responsible for making sure that, the key part of that chain of custody of how the ballots that were voted are handled, they're the key players in all of that. And Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about all the fun we get to have with canvassing elections?
Absolutely. There is multiple steps once the ballots are voted and that we have them. Mail ballots and election day ballots are two separate processes, and the mail ballots would be part of pre-canvassing, which we are allowed to begin at not until 7 a.m. on election day, and we must continue until we are finished. These ballots would be done centrally in your election office or by your election workers from the county. Then when the polls close, everything comes back to the election offices, and then that would be the actual canvassing, where all the supplies are going through to make sure that all the ballots are found and accounted for. Everything that went out, when those 1,000 ballots go out, those 1,000 ballots must come back. So that's all recorded. And again, part of the chain of custody, who had access to them is known, and who brought them back is also recorded. So we know from the time the ballots go out to the time they're returned, we make sure that there is that continuous chain of custody and everything is accounted for.
Right. And then after all of that is done, we do a series of audits. And so one of those audits is a component of what Tim is talking about. So if I do send 1,000 ballots back out to a precinct, one of the audits we're doing is to make sure that those 1,000 ballots came back. We're accounting for the ones that were voted. We're making sure that matches the number of people who signed in at the polling place. So that's kind of the first set of audits we're doing, is we're matching up the number of votes with the number of people who signed in on the books. The other thing that we do is all the counties are required to do a 2% audit. We do them in different ways. But many counties, do some kind of hand count, or they will count them, or they count them on a different type of machine to make sure that everything adds up. And then we also do what's called a risk limiting audit, where they pick a specific race. This year, they're going to pick the presidential race. I feel pretty confident. And what we'll do is we'll go through we'll all be selecting precincts. We go through those precincts and make sure that the vote results that we reported to the state match up with a hand count of those same results. And if they don't match up exactly, we explain why. So for instance, there might be a stray mark on a ballot that that made the ballot overvote, but like when you look at it, maybe people think that it wasn't an overvote. So but that will only happen with like maybe a single ballot. And so it's a very precise process. Tim's been doing this for 15 years now, and he can tell you that, these audits that we do, they pretty much, they're 100% every time. And our machines are very, they're very rigorous, and they do a great job of tabulating votes.
And if there are any discrepancies, as something like Thad mentioned, these would be worked out in a bipartisan manner with the election board or the canvassing board of your county.
Right. Let me give you a little bit of an overview of the calendar. I mentioned the last day to register and the last day for mail voting, and then election day. The other thing to know is on the Tuesday after the election, that is when we're required to report unofficial results to the state. And so, that it gives us time to do our canvass and to go through all the provisional ballots, go through all of our ballots from people in the military and overseas. In this election, we are seeing a very large number of overseas citizens and people in the military requesting ballots. And then on that, the next day, on the 13th, is when the Department of State will review and see if any contests require having a recount. Just over the last 4 years, we've had 2 recounts. We had one in a general election for a Commonwealth court. I believe it was the Commonwealth court. And then we had one in a primary for the U.S. Senate. And then on the 25th, that is the day that we're all required to submit our official results to the Department of State. We have a process where we sign our books once with unofficial results, and then we'll sign them a second time with official results. And during that period is when people can request recounts or other sorts of bring up other sorts of issues that they may want the board to consider. And that's, those are the kind of the key points we wanted to make. Tim, is there anything else you wanted to mention?
That is a very high level look at what happens from now until November 25th. But there's a lot of other stuff that goes into the whole process. So it doesn't happen overnight.
Great, thank you two so much. I always find I learn something new at the Ballot Box Basics. I'll now open it up to questions. Audience members, feel free to continue asking questions using the Q&A function. It looks like we have a few. So let's see. What discretion exists to refuse to certify the ballots cast? Are certification decisions publicly accessible?
Well, the statute does definitely dictate a process. So there are 2 ways to question the results of an election. If it's thought that there's something went wrong, that there was some type of discrepancy at a specific location, a specific polling place, then that would be one process. And then there's the second process would be, as Thad said, that 5 days from the first certification where the findings of the election board can be questioned in court. And then that's a whole different process. So the election code is very specific on how these discrepancies or these questions can be answered. And much of the time, any questions that people have, the local election board, your county election board will be able to answer those pretty easily.
Right. And you were asking also if those are public meetings. So on the Friday after election day, so election day is the 5th, so that'd be the 8th, all the boards of elections are required to meet. And so part of that process is to, they will go through the results. They will start considering provisional ballots and reviewing those. And that, again, is a public process. If the election is close, I highly expect there to be lots of lawyers involved as we go through this whole process. They will all show up out of the woodwork. And like Tim said, it's a very open process. And And, as you all know, in Pennsylvania, in most counties, the Board of Elections is also your county commissioners. And they're, obviously they have partisanship, but they're also, and when they do elections, in almost all cases, they're very nonpartisan in how they view these things. What they want is to make sure that the results are counted accurately and that they certify the elections, they certify the results, appropriately. And, do you have a board, a different board, or is yours your commission as well?
Yeah, we do have a different board. Lehigh County is a home rule charter, so it's made up of representatives from each of the parties and also appointed representatives by the commissioners for each of the major parties, and also the chair of the chair would be the county administrator who was elected. So whatever party they are would have the majority.
Got it.
Of three. But yes, most are the three county commissioners are the election board by statute. But yes, everything is open process. The election board meetings have to be advertised and are not a lot of participation during the year happens at these meetings. Only if something controversial happens.
Thank you. And another question we have from Colleen is, could you please clarify again the difference between an application and a ballot? Also, if a voter got a mail-in ballot for the primary, will they get one for the general election?
Sure. The application is a two-step process. A voter would have to apply to receive a ballot. They're not automatically sent to you, and they won't be sent to you unless you fill out an application properly. The second step would be you get that ballot sent to you, and you fill it out and return it. What was the second part of the question?
If a voter got a mail-in ballot for the primary, will they get one for the general election?
It really depends how you filled out that application.
Right.
There is, it's more of an annual list that you could be on to receive a mail ballot for both the primary and the general election, the November election. It's not a permanent status, although statutorily it is referred to as permanent. You would then again need to apply the following year. But if you didn't check that box that said permanent, you would have to apply for every election. And
Right.
Depending if it was a mail ballot or an absentee has different set of laws that govern that.
And that's why we encourage people to go on to the Department of State's website. You can look up, when you look up your voter status, it'll tell you if you're going to get a ballot for November. And that's the important place to look.
Great, thank you. And I think a follow-up to that was, does the voter get a ballot or a reminder?
Oh, so this is one of those funny things that happens to us. So people will call our office and they'll say, this is already happening. People say, I received 3 ballots in the mail. Now, they didn't receive ballots, they received mail ballot applications, and people just confuse the terminology sometimes. And so, the ballot comes from us, it's in a, very specific envelope. The applications you're going to get are going to come from everywhere. And like I stressed at the outset, just send in one. That's all we ask. If you want to know if you're on the list, call your election office. Don't submit 5.
And that single ballot is specific to that voter. So there are different barcodes and information on that ballot envelope that's sent to you that specify who it's to and what address and what voter number it's going to. If someone were happened to lose that ballot or destroy it, spilled coffee on it, and was issued a second ballot, that first set of numbers that are specific to that voter would be deleted, and a new set of numbers would be issued with that second ballot. So if that first ballot happens to come back, it wouldn't be in the system and it wouldn't be able to be processed. So it would be set aside so that that voter can't accidentally vote twice.
Thank you. And on the issue of Blizzard applications, what do you do when you get the 2D and later applications?
Just throw them away. So, they're going to spend $60 million between now and November between the two parties. And part of that is going to be in trying to get people to vote by mail or vote early, because parties want to be able to bank those votes. Everybody who votes early is somebody that the parties don't have to mobilize on election day. And so they're going to send a lot of people applications for mail ballots. And if you already have one, you can just happily throw them away or throw them into your furnace or whatever you do to heat your house. So
yeah, and those applications usually have some kind of identifying emblem or logo from whatever organization is sending it to you, and it'll say paid for by or sent by whatever organization, whereas ours are all pretty uniform and they all come from the county offices.
Right. And we send all of our applications to everybody in January, because we send applications to everybody who's on that permanent list that Tim mentioned. And so we're not sending out mail-in ballot applications now. That's not what we do.
Unless they're requested.
Unless they're requested.
Typically
exactly.
ask for an application.
Right.
Because we don't send them randomly.
No, we do not.
Great, thank you. And then a next question comes from Anonymous. The restriction on delivering one's own ballot is only for the drop boxes or Office of Elections, right? A spouse could take both ballots to the mailbox, correct?
Technically, I'm pretty sure the answer is no. You're supposed to drop your own ballot into the mailbox. However, I don't think anybody's going to police who drops off your ballot into the post office. But if you bring it to a drop box or to the election office, absolutely, you can only drop off your own. And it's, the law generally states that you're supposed to drop off your own ballot.
Great, thank you. And then we have a couple more questions here. If you move, must you bring ID if it is the first time voting in the town or in your voting precinct?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, you do. So just, people have IDs, just bring one of those 25 documents that we accept with you and you'll be fine.
When you register, when you're registered at a new location, in that poll book, when you go into your voting precinct, it'll be designated that you must show ID because you're a first time.
Right.
Thank you. And then let's see, we have one more question here. Are you aware of Marjorie Taylor Greene did a poll watcher training for Lehigh County, PA poll watchers this past weekend? Do you have any concerns about such third-party trainings? Do you anticipate challenges by her trainees to the votes that are cast in Lehigh County? Is there any safeguards to such challenges in place?
Well, watchers and poll workers are two different things. So organizations, candidates and parties are allowed to designate watchers at polling locations. They would then need to follow specific laws within those polling locations. So whatever she taught those people would still have to meet the requirements of the election code. So they don't get to challenge votes. They challenge only residency and registration at a polling location. So
right. And there are very specific reasons why you can challenge somebody. So you can't challenge people based on their party, their race, any kind of distinguishing things. They would have to have evidence, basically some basic evidence that either A, the person didn't live where they say they live, or the person is not who they say they are. Those are the only two reasons you can challenge somebody. And the other thing too is there are very specific laws on that govern the behavior of a watcher in a polling place. So watchers are allowed to keep lists of who has voted. They're allowed to they are allowed to make these challenges. but they're very limited amount of things they're allowed to do. They're not allowed to talk to voters. They can only talk to the judge of elections. They're really not supposed to be taking photographs or other things in a polling place. So there's a very there's very specific guidelines that keep these sorts of activities from happening. The other thing too is these watchers have to be appointed by their political party, and parties often, they have specific people they want to be watchers, who are people who are precinct committee people or people who can help mobilize people, not necessarily the people who went to that event. Those people might not even be selected by the parties to be watchers.
So the answer would be no. I'm not concerned that her challenges 2 votes,
right,
or whatever that question was. No, the legitimate votes will be counted, and right. She and the people she instructed would have to go through the proper process to challenge those votes.
Great, thank you so much. And then it looks like we have one last question here. If the poll book doesn't say you need an ID, you don't need an ID, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, you to be registered, you would have to have provided some type of qualifying ID to be registered.
Right. And so in most places, they're going to ask you your name, and they may ask you your address, because we want to make sure people are in the book correctly. Okay. But those are the key things people are going to ask you, and then they'll check you right in.
If you do vote by mail, though, you would have had to provide ID every time you apply.
Right. And this just reminds me too, if a person receives their mail-in ballot, and this happens a lot with people who are traveling to Florida, so all those people who are not hardy enough to stay here year round, they may have expected to go to Florida, and so they requested a mail ballot, and then they decided to stay here through November, through the election. They can just, if you receive a mail ballot, if you take the ballot and the return envelope that has the part on it where you would sign and date it, the declaration component, if you bring those to a polling place, you can give them to the judge of elections, and they'll have you sign a declaration that you're surrendering your ballot, and you can vote a regular ballot. So if you know people who receive a mail ballot and then they say, well, what if I want to vote at the polls? They can absolutely vote at the polls. And if they will just bring in that ballot in the envelope, they won't have any trouble at all being able to vote at the polls on election day.
And all that information would be indicated in the poll books when that person at the polling location looks the voter up.
Great, thank you. And then it looks like we have a couple more last questions. If anyone else has questions, please drop them in. So this one's a bit of more of a comment. It says, unless your identity is challenged, then you'll need ID, even if it's not your first time voting in the precinct. Could you speak to that?
Hold on a second. Let me. No, you do not need ID. You do not need ID unless you're a first-time voter. Those are the only people who need ID. And even if you were challenged, so somebody might challenge who you are or where you live, but in a lot of the precincts that are in the state, I mean, we have 3,000, some odd townships, boroughs, and cities. In many cases, the people at your polling place are going to know who the voter is, and they're going to be able to say, if you try to challenge Bob, they're going to say, Bob lives next door to me. Bob, I go to church with Bob. Bob's good. And so, in most cases, people actually don't, even if somebody tried to challenge you, it would not work out well. So.
Great, thank you.
And there's a whole process that would happen at a polling location if someone were to challenge you.
Yeah, you would still get to vote. You would just vote a provisional.
Absolutely. You would have to get, yeah.
And and then and then we would our office would adjudicate whether or not the person lived where they said they lived.
Yeah, and the law is specific. You can't challenge just to disrupt. You right. Again have to challenge the residency and the registration.
Right.
Great, thank you too. And then our last question is, do you have any suggestions for people who are fearful for going to the polls?
Sure, don't be. You know, there's you know, the things I can tell you what I know, what I worry about. We just had an elections conference. I can tell you what most of us worry about. We worry about power outages. We worry about people getting the flu, like our poll workers getting the flu, and like us having a lot of sick people. And you know, we worry about the weather. Those are the kind of things we worry about, because you know, the biggest concern I have is that I'm going to have 10 polling places lose power at the same time, and then I have to go find a bunch of generators, which I actually have generators on backup from all my fire departments, and so does Tim. But you know, those are the things we worry about. We don't really worry about you know, disruptions at our polling places. You know, we have plans with our public safety offices. There will be lots of law enforcement out and about on election day, but you know, you know, I doubt anything will happen anywhere in the state on election day.
And again, the people at your polling place are your neighbors. They're
Right.
specific groups of people that live directly around that polling place. So
Right.
Very rare is there any issue like that.
Right. And if you think about in 2020, you know, where there were, you know, issues that came up, but they all happened after the election. You know, there were some issues, you know, I know, you know, in Philadelphia, you know, but they were all like 2 days later when they were when they were going through the canvass process. It wasn't on election day.
And we all have meetings and conversations with our law enforcement officials, our emergency management officials, all of these people throughout the year. We have
Right.
very good relationships with these folks, and they know what we do, and we know what they can provide us if necessary.
Yeah.
That looks like that was all the questions. Thank you so
Great.
much, Thad
Great.
and Timothy. I really appreciate you two joining us and giving such a great informative presentation. And if anyone wants to check out any future webinars, I'll drop the link in the chat. And everyone, I hope you all have a great evening.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.